City of Stevens Point Joint Review Board, recorded July 6, 2020.
Holman, looks like we're in good shape. So we will get this meeting underway. I apologize for the delay. My iPad didn't, for some reason, isn't doing video. We'll need a roll call, and I am representing the city. Mike Lisa, I am here. I saw Chris Holman from the county, Tom Owens from the school district, Ben from the technical college, and we have several members of the public with us as well, it looks like. We have a couple of items on the agenda. The first one is consideration and appointment and or reaffirmation of the Joint Review Board's public member. Director Karnowski, did you have anything to add in this regard?
John Schleiss has served historically as the city's public member, would recommend approval.
Okay. And John is on somewhere?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
There he is. I heard the voice. There's John. Gotcha. Okay. Do we have a motion to that effect? I will move to do that.
This is Chris Holman. I'll second.
Seconded by Holman. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is the election and or reaffirmation of the chairperson. Director, anything there?
Nothing there. Historically, either the mayor or community development director serves as the chairman of the Joint Review Board. Because community development director is not a member of this body, I would recommend approval of the mayor.
Any discussion there? Pardon?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And that is approved. All right, so now we have item number 5, discuss responsibilities of the Joint Review Board. Director.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the Joint Review Board, thanks for taking time today to meet with everybody. This first meeting really is for the Joint Review Board to review a few things. So first off, we're going to go through the financial summaries for TIF districts 5 through 10. Comptroller Treasurer Laddick will be providing some information about that. Second, we're going to be looking at the project plans for proposed TIF number 11, TIF number 12, and TIF number 13. Today, the Joint Review Board will just be hearing a presentation by Ellers on the proposed 3 TIF districts. And from there, we would be setting the next meeting date where we would formally adopt the project plans for those 3 TIF districts. Also on the call today is Don Gunderson from Ellers, which is the city's financial advisor. Don, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just a couple comments, and many of you have been served in this capacity before, perhaps with the city or in other cases with other jurisdictions in your taxing districts. As part of your role here is today, as Ryan mentioned, this is your organizational meeting. You will ultimately be asked to come back and review all the public record if these TIFs move forward through the city process, which includes public hearing and consideration by their commission and also their city council. So if it proceeds through those with a positive affirmation, then you'll be asked to come back, review those documents, which is the resolutions for all of those, and make the final vote to consider the creation of these 3 particular districts in the city. And as well as your role in the overlapping taxing entity, obviously, while these are located within your jurisdictions, during the life of the district, you forego the tax revenue collection on the increment value, but for the assistance of the creation of these districts would not create new value. So that's one of the findings that we'll be considering at the final action by an adoption of a resolution. But as part of the members also will annually be asked to review or meet to review the status of all the tax amendment districts. And that's what Corey will be going through with you in a moment. So not only get the fun part of being part of the creation or amendment of a district, you also get to meet annually to review all of them. So this is, I think, the perhaps third, maybe it's the fourth year already that you've involved in that. So I have no further comments, but I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Just one little housekeeping item. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself just to avoid some background noise and clutter. Okay. Anybody at all have any questions in regards to the responsibilities of the Joint Review Board? Okay, then we will move on to item number 6, which is the review of the financial summaries for TIDs 5 through 10, beginning on page 3 of your packets. Corey, are you taking that one?
Yes, I can cover this one. So I did include a basic financial summary. It is in the packet. Put it all on one page. Just a couple of items to note. First of all, if you look at the top box with the financial information for year end 2019, one of the things that you'll notice is that we do have a couple of TIF districts that are in a negative balance, but you'll notice that those are improving. So you've got TIF District 6, which is the downtown TIF district. That is definitely making some good progress, and we expect that to continue and actually to accelerate as far as getting out of the negative and the repayment to the city general fund. You also notice TIF 8, which is the TIF district on Country Club Drive, the Spectre Print area. That one is also continuing to sort of get out of the hole and repay the city some of the money that the city has advanced to it. And then we also have a new TIF district, TIF District 10, which was the downtown overlay district. We're referring to that as the downtown transition district because it basically is like a circle around downtown as far as what that covers. And that does also have a negative balance, which is very typical whenever we're creating a new district. There are some fees in getting that district established and some expenses there. So typically we would expect to see it be a little bit negative for the first year just because you've had those expenses and you haven't really had the revenue yet. And then moving down to the middle box, the valuation information. So with the values, I put this in based on the budget year just to keep it more understandable and consistent. So the 2019 value would actually be based on what the value would have been as of January 1st, 2018, because that's what would affect the 2019 budget. And then the 2020 value would actually be January 1st of 2019. And you can see that during that period of time, we definitely had some pretty good growth, especially on the north side in TIF District 5, as well as TIF District 9, which is East Park Commerce Center. We don't have figures out yet for 2021. However, I would expect it to be a little bit less of an increase for 2021, but we should still see some continual growth in value, especially we did have a large project in the East Park Commerce Center TIF. So I would expect that the value, especially in that district, would continue to go up. And then the bottom table, you have some information as far as the overall increment collected, which, as you can see, between 2019 and 2020, a pretty substantial jump. in both TIF Districts 5 and TIF Districts 9, which is what you would expect to see, where the value in a district goes up, so then the increment that you are collecting there should also go up. So that's kind of the brief summary, and available for any questions that anybody has.
Just out of curiosity, Corey, what happened to TIF 7?
So TIF 7 is the AIG Travel Guard TIF, and basically, I believe the assessment was lowered a little bit, and I'd have to look back at what exactly got lowered there. Actually, let me look that up, and I'll get back to you as far as it would have either been the real estate or the personal property. But I can give you a better answer. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions for Corey? Okay, then we will move along to the review of developers agreement summaries for TIDs 5 through 10. Director or Corey?
Sure. It doesn't matter. Either one of us can do it. So we did have 4 amendments to existing development agreements. We'll kind of go through these one by one real quick. So within TIF 5 itself, Stevens Point Housing LLC, which was the original developer for the student housing complex on the north side of the city, ended up selling their portion, or selling the project to to Pointer Plaza LLC, Catalyst Construction, who is the general contractor on that project. And as part of that, the original upfront incentive included $2.5 million for both phases, which was 2 buildings, with a 50% pay-go incentive for the commercial component. So what we ended up doing was amending that development agreement. So we untied the phase 1 and phase 2, which is the second part of the building. So we allowed the $1.5 million or so in upfront incentive for the first phase, and then dropped the 50% pay-go incentive for the redevelopment of that property. Again, the contractor took over the development of the project and wasn't able to committing to start phase 2, which is the second building this year. Within TID 9, there was an amendment to the Lineage Service Cold Storage Development Agreement. Originally, as they've expanded eastward, we have provided 70% pay-go incentive to Lineage. When they purchased in late December of 2019, the remaining 13 acres from the city, we did renegotiate the development agreement where we dropped the pay-go incentive from 70% to 50% on anything that was developed on the 13 acres. So they're currently developing phase 4, which is 125,000 square foot addition. And actually tonight at Planning Commission will be approving phase 5. Both phase 4 and phase 5 are occurring on the 13-acre property. And so we'll see an increase in increments. And again, that's went from 70% to 50% for pay-go incentive for the stuff that's on the 13 acres. The remaining 70% is still on the original development site. For TID 10, that's general capital. Currently, the Berkshire project is under construction downtown. We did change a few things. We originally had the upfront incentive of $2 million, and then exchanged. Developer agreed to make a minimum tax payment in order to repay the original incentive. We did change it to add the pay-go incentive for any excess TIF increment above the minimum required, and then 50% pay-go TIF paid back with 4% interest at the end of the agreement. And that was required as General Capital went through their project financing. This was one of the securities that the banks that they were working with was asking. That project is under construction, has done extremely well. We've had no issues with their construction, knock on wood thus far. And then of course TID 10 with merge, that's the Lullaby site, multi-use development. The original developers agreement guaranteed a minimum value of 20 million, increasing to 25 million as the project continues. In exchange, the city provided upfront incentive of 3 million plus the pay-go incentive. And then it's important to note that the pay-go incentive was contingent on them hitting the 20 and $25 million values. We did change a few minor things. There was additional environmental contamination found on the Lullaby site. And so the city council agreed to amend the development agreement to provide another 462,000, what I'll call upfront incentive to help with the environmental remediation costs. And then we adjusted the pay-go incentive accordingly to help offset that cost to the city. And that was pretty much the reason there. But through 2019 to 2020, those have been our changes to development agreements. I don't know if Corey has anything he wants to add to that.
No, I think the director pretty much covered it. And then I did also find an answer to Tom's question. And for TIF 7, the reduction in value was primarily related to personal property. And sometimes you'll have that where basically the personal property is actually the stuff inside the building rather than the building itself. And what can happen is if that stuff is existing, it can actually depreciate. So that would be the reduction in value for TIF 7.
Okay. Any questions for either Director Kanoski or Comptroller Treasurer Laddick?
Yeah, I just have one question. Thank you. Is there a timeline for the Lullaby site redevelopment?
So they were pushed back on their financing due to COVID. The financial institution that they were working with had put a moratorium on all commercial lending. And so they still are very much committed to that project, and they're hopeful they can start either later this summer or early fall still. We did extend the completion date during that last amendment. I guess that was left out of this spreadsheet that you see from September 30th of 2021 for phase 1 to December 31st of 2021. We did provide additional leeway on the completion date for phase 1. But you know, we're still working through it. We're still pushing them to get a project in the ground this year yet. And for the development agreement, they need to be in the ground. So,
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, this is Chris Holman. I just had a quick question about the change to 5. Just because I know that typically PAYGO offers some insulation to the city, for instance. I'm just curious, you dropped it entirely, and I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, just to understand how that's moving forward without the PAYGO.
So the commercial component included the 50% PAYGO, and that was encouraged. The city had wanted to see commercial development along Division Street. The original developer still owns that parcel and is still working on completing that. But because of the challenges that we faced with the original developer as part of the dissolution of the original development agreement, we pulled the 50% PAYGO. I would suspect that something would still happen there. Marty had letters of intent drawn up and signed between him and a number of different companies, none of which we're allowed to disclose, unfortunately. And so I would still suspect something would happen there, just without the 50% PAYGO, which is good for the TID because now 100% of that increment will be going towards debt service.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Last call. Okay, then we will move along to item number 8, which begins on page 6 of your packet, and that is the project plan for TID 11. Director, do you want to start out and offer introductions?
Sure. So TID 11 includes a pretty wide for a wide range of area, including the current convent property, and then a number of properties that are underdeveloped along the Division Street corridor. And it actually overlaps with TID number 5 in a number of areas. In general, we're looking to create this TID to help assist in the redevelopment of the convent property. It's pretty public that the sisters are in the process of relocating the remaining sisters to Ohio at some point in the next year. And the sisters have been working with General Capital Group, which is the group that's doing the Berkshire Senior Housing Project downtown, on forming a development plan for the property. There's about 35 acres remaining there. Much of it, especially in the north end, is wetland, but we thought with TID 5 coming up on the end of its life cycle here, it would make sense to include some properties along Division Street that are underutilized or underdeveloped. And then, of course, to implement part of the targeted area master plan for the Division Street corridor, which was adopted by the joint bodies of the city. I believe this is pre-COVID, so it might have been February. So that was the purpose of creating TID number 11. This is what I'll call the lowest hanging fruit. We know that a development will occur at some point on the convent property, and it's important for us, especially because we're coming up against our 12% equalized value rule, that we establish this TIF district and the other two as well. With that, on the call, and we'll be doing most of the presenting, is Dawn Gunderson. She's our financial advisor from Ellers. She, I believe, has a PowerPoint, and Dawn should be able to share your screen, and if not, I can give you that.
Okay. Okay, it says that you have to enable participant screen sharing, so you can maybe turn that on.
Yes, here, I'm gonna make you the host, and then you should be able to share your screen.
All right. Are you seeing, what are you seeing? Are you seeing my
Yes.
proposed? Okay. So as mentioned earlier, I'll just kind of highlight a few things on TID 11. They're in the schedules I'm going to review with you are in the project plan. So I'm going to kind of walk through this PowerPoint to kind of summarize things. And certainly if there is, sorry about that, is questions on anything more detailed, and we can certainly revert to that. So Brian has mentioned a few things related to this. It's overlay of TID 5. The estimated base value of the entire boundary is about $22.5 million. But when we overlay, then there's a certain percentage of that, or the overlay of 5, those parcels do not count again in the base. So it's, and when we start looking at 12% test, so there's about half of the value is within those districts and then would not be counted. So this would net out to be around $11 million of tax base. TID 11 is proposed as a blight district, which has a 27-year maximum life. The city has gone through the parcel identification of that. About 60% of the parcels by acreage meet that statutory definition. And of course that the word blight is more frightening than the statutory definition, but it is appropriate to classify this district accordingly. As Ryan kind of described the mapping, this is actually the boundary map that's in the project plan. And the area that's kind of in blue is the remaining TID 5. The red area, and it's more of a pink where the overlap is, will be the new boundaries of the district. The projects have been identified and we've estimated phasing of these. I think it's important to understand that the projects will be undertaken as development presents itself, so that pacing will be done. The city's not going out up front and financing these projects all up front, but this is as to the project cost. We've estimated about $29 million of of either increment or investments into infrastructure or development incentives as resulting necessary in this area, including road improvement and some land acquisition as well. The public infrastructure would most generally be financed with tax-exempt debt. The incentives, again, those would all need development agreements, which would be provided to you at that time. Be a mixture of probably taxable debt and municipal revenue bonds, or the pay-as-you-go kind of incentives. Again, those will be determined as the development proceeds. And again, it's very important that the incentives would coincide with that development and the phasing of the project costs. So during the life of this district, it could be all of these costs will be undertaken, or perhaps not. But again, it'll time based upon that development opportunity. We estimate at this time about $7 million of increment value based on the cons tax rate and no appreciation on property values. It would generate about $34.7 million increment over that 27-year time period. And assuming this methodology, the bid would close in about 2045, which is actually a little earlier than the statutory allowance for the district. Here is kind of the phasing of the development. Again, it's basically into two different phases and spaced out over a period of 13 years is the assumption for this analysis in terms of that development phasing. $70 million is the estimate again at this point in time. This schedule represents the projected increment flow, and this is, I mentioned earlier, the $34 million of tax revenue collection and a constant tax rate and appreciation on the property values. And again, these schedules are within the project plan that was provided to you. And this, I'm sure, is certainly difficult to see on any screen, but this is the cash flow projections where we've taken the development assumptions, determined a tax generation of tax revenue, and then built a financing plan to finance the project cost. And as I mentioned, either tax-exempt bonds, taxable bonds, or pay-as-go incentives. The city reserves right to finance these projects any which way that is most appropriate and most economic for them to do so, and those decisions will be made at the time that the project's undertaken. So that kind of concludes the remarks for TIF number 11. But again, I'll open it up at this moment if anyone has any questions before I move on to 12. Okay, hearing none at this point, I'll move on to 12. And Ryan, I'll go ahead and let you mention any summary comments you might have.
Sure. Yeah. So TID number 12 includes part of the city's first industrial park. For those of you who are familiar with some of our local businesses, that includes companies like Steel King that are still in that area, and that's adjacent to the rail spur located along Michigan Ave and Rice Streets. The TID would then actually go down further south, which pick up the Shell gas station. It's sat vacant for a number of years now on the city's south side, and would pick up the Knights Inn, the former Blue Top Motel, the restaurant that's there as well, and then some of the properties along the Church Street corridor in an effort to help eliminate some of the blight and rehabilitate much of the area. I think the trailer park is included in that as well. Don will get into this a little bit more. When staff put together the original boundary, we thought that we could utilize the rail spur as kind of that connecting point. It's kind of an odd looking TIF district. We found out that no, we couldn't use the rail spur as we had wanted to, and so we actually had to adjust the boundaries a little bit. And so prevent from having to reconvene this body, again, we are going to hold a public hearing that's separate for TID 12 at a later date for Plan Commission. But it's important that this body review the plan because it hasn't changed drastically, even though we've adjusted the boundary to, instead of being just the rail spur, we included the properties that are on the west side of that rail spur, which is roughly 10 residential homes. So
Thank you. I'll kind of kick it up from here. At this point, we're estimating the value of this district to be about just under $19 million, and that includes the additional properties that Ryan mentioned were added, and you'll see that in a moment on a map. So this district is proposed as a rehabilitation district. Properties in need of rehabilitation. It has a 27-year maximum life, and with additional territory, we're at about just under 59% of the area meets that finding, and that was a parcel by parcel determination that was done by the city. And the map on the screen here, the updated map, it looks quite similar to what was in the project plan that you received. We have subsequently, as Ryan mentioned, changed the boundaries slightly. There's a railroad corridor, and it's a right-of-way corridor, and the DOR is telling us we can't use it as a connecting point to allow the parties to be contiguous, since not actually owned by the railroad. It's just a right-of-way for their use. So there was three primary focuses of redevelopment here and rehabilitation needs. So that railroad corridor had been our connecting point, and that is on the west side or the east side of this map to the right. You'll see there's all these individual single-family parcels that have been added now to make that connection between the north end and the south end of this district. So that, again, the city was trying to only bring in what they felt was necessary, but had to continue a little bit more to meet the contiguous requirement of the district boundary. So, try to skip a screen here. Here, a listing of project cost. Again, this is some land acquisition, infrastructure improvements that we've identified, some environmental remediation needed cost here, and as well as some development incentives if necessary, or the implementation of this project plan. The financing for this, again, will be somewhat similar to the last one. The infrastructure would be financed tax-exempt debt. Any incentives would be a mixture of taxable debt or municipal revenue obligation PAYGOs. The timing of the projects and the incentives that could be offered would all coincide with the timing of that development. There's about, I mentioned, $11 million in project cost. At this point, we're estimating about $19.2 million of potential future increment value. That increment over 27 years would be about $7.7 million of tax increment generated revenue. While we've identified $11 million of project cost, that $19 million of value would not necessarily support all of that. So our analysis at this time, under the assumptions of $2 million of value, the district could support $5.2 million in project costs. Again, those costs would be undertaken and coincide with the timing of development. If that development value is greater, then more projects could be undertaken. And if that happens, we potentially could have more than the $5.2 million of overall project cost in the district. Using that same methodology as before, the district would actually take its full statutory life to recover the $5.2 million. And most likely, if more than that are undertaken with time, it would probably extend as well. Part of the reason for that timing delay is as Ryan mentioned up front, we anticipate the city reaching their 12-cent capacity for TIF accretion come August 15th. And so this is an important area for redevelopment and opportunity for them and need for these incentives to happen. The timing of the development is somewhat delayed here, which does limit the project cost. So if this value development moves forward, then some of those project costs could be undertaken timely, and there would be more time to recover those costs, the potential to undertake additional need cost as well. This is the increment cash flow that determined that $7.3 million of overall tax revenue collection, again with a zero appreciation on property and a constant tax rate. Obviously, these will be adjusted annually, and we'll know from year to year how that may change. Again, there's a period of time where any upfront costs to the city they would have to front. You'll see some negative numbers of the front end of this schedule on the tax flow, and then the timing of the project cost and the development would take place later for this district, requiring it to run a little longer than the other two that we'll be talking about. So I'll pause here again on district number 12 to allow for any questions anyone have.
I'll add something real quick, just for the joint body here. Well, you know, with TIF 12, we don't have any immediate development plans, but it's really important that as the city goes through the process and as we see, okay, we're coming up on that 12% equalized value rule that the state has imposed on us. We need to do something, and seeing that this area is in need of some rehabilitation, staff felt really comfortable that we need to put this tool in place to make TIF number 12 and the south side more vibrant and an attractive place to reinvest. And so this is just one of those tools in the toolbox, and probably the most important one that we have. And so establishing TIF 12 is really critical for the success of the south side of the city right now.
Yeah, Ryan, my question was, I'm trying to figure out what phase one was in looking at the map. Was that predominantly the environmental remediation from the gas station?
Yeah, I mean, the idea would be the phase one, of course, the environmental remediation from the gas station. If Steel King were ever to relocate or were to do anything with their property, we would probably help incentivize whomever would take that property over, hopefully to demolish a building and do some environmental cleanup there as well. That's a conversation that I think is worth having and was included as part of the project plan. And then redeveloping, you know, the old industrial park. What does that look like specifically? I don't know. It could be townhomes, it could be single family, or it could be multiple family units there. But yeah, those environmentals as part of the phase one and the phase two, and then the remedial action report as well is important.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, Dawn, go ahead.
I'll move on then to the proposed TIF 3 on the east side. Ryan, I don't know, did you want to make any upfront comments or?
Yeah, I'll just add a few things. This is an area that, you know, I don't know how many times in the last several, years it's been identified as a possible redevelopment area, and nothing's ever come to fruition. You know, it was built in the 80s. This is the former Cops, the former Walmart, Applebee's is out there as well, and a few restaurants. You know, and it was built in the 80s as, part of this growth outward on the fringes of the city. And when Cops left and Walmart left, the city was left with a pretty blighted property that has had a lot of interest, but no one's been willing or able to pull the trigger. And so to make it more of a developable property, I think the city would like to see a mixed number of uses within that, some residential, some commercial. And so a part of that in trying to get that redeveloped will include a number of infrastructure improvements, possible demolition, right-of-way acquisition, and so to make that project work and to make an attractive place for people to invest. Again, we don't have a plan in place right now. We don't have someone who's knocking at the door of the city saying, hey, this is what we want to do out here, but we need to make it work. But this is one of the main entrances into the city, and having that property on the side when you drive in, blighted, does not create a sense of economic vibrancy that we're going for within the city's limits. So if we can get something going there in some type of redevelopment And if we have to utilize TID to do that, it's important to have that tool in our toolbox. So that's all I have.
Okay. So this TID 13, we're calling it the East Side bid. At this point, we're estimating the base value of this district about $6.5 million. It is a blight district as well as number 11, a 27-year max life. We've determined about 98.6% of the area of the district is blighted. This will finance, again, public infrastructure with tax-exempt debt. Some of the incentives will be fit again with taxable and pay-go revenue bonds, depending on what those development agreements, if there are any, would entail. Again, the timing and the occurrence of incentives and project costs would coincide with the timing of development. Staff is estimating about $35 million of incremental value potential there, and over 27 years, about $16 million of tax increment revenue. That phasing on this one, and I mean, again, would be a little longer district, which is very common for the blight or rehabilitation districts. We see that generally those districts taking the longest because of the need for the types of projects that are undertaken. Here's the district boundaries list, district number 13 that are listed in here. Smaller area than the others. About $15 million. Again, this is infrastructure improvement, some perhaps significant development incentives as needed. There's also some stormwater improvement that are needed in this area as well. The development timing of this, again, we have a slight delay. Nothing immediate here, so we have some assumptions for development starting in 2024. And running through 2030 is the phase out for this analysis. The tax revenue collection, about $6 million of increment value over that 27-year period. And again, the cash flow on this, there would be some initial upfront costs that would be financed in advance by the city with that delay of development taking place. Again, this one would run its course to finance all of the project costs identified unless the timing of the development comes on a little sooner. So those are the comments I have on TID 13. So I'll again open it up for anyone who has questions. And then I have a couple comments on our remaining timing before we wrap up with the agendas.
Any questions on TID 13?
Yeah, this is Chris Holman again. It's not a question specific to 13, but just maybe where you're headed with some of your comments after this too. But I'm just curious, when you talk about the methodology used, and I know that nobody has a crystal ball, but has the methodology or kind of forecasting changed due to the economic landscape, in the sense that there's some degree of uncertainty in terms of, are we going to head to a recession? How deep will it be? What will recovery look like? And how that might impact any of the proposed, everything we're looking at here, but also just in general. I'm just curious about kind of the general landscape of TIDs.
Well, as far as anything specific here, I mean, we're not showing anything happening beyond in these. I think in general, what we're seeing is many projects that are already in process are moving forward. We still see a lot of developers that are looking to continue with development projects. I don't know, Ryan, speak more so I think for the city in general, but you know, I think it's yet to be determined if this is going to have an impact on values of property. You know, we're not hearing that at this point in time. You know, we continually do not show appreciation value in our initial analysis with districts. You know, if we during the Great Recession we started showing devaluation of property because we were seeing that. Years have seen a much greater appreciation of property values, and we still were conservative in holding that line. I don't think that the impact of this will hit us in the first year if there is any decline in property values, because we're going to be basing next year's revenue collections on values as of 1/1/2020. So we haven't made any adjustments because we haven't seen or heard that impact is going to be real. And I guess I'll let you speak to what you're seeing, Stephen's point, or if you're hearing anything else from your local assessors.
Yeah, thanks, Don and Chris. That's a really great question, and was something that when we were putting together some of the development assumptions and the expenditure assumptions, I did take into consideration that we might be delayed 5-6 years after these have been created. So yeah, I did take into consideration. I think it's important to know too that if development doesn't occur, okay, we're not going to undertake some of these expenses. It doesn't make sense that without any increment coming in that we would take on that kind of debt. We'd be putting ourselves in a financial situation that we just don't want to be in. And so, yes, we have delayed some of the start of development, especially in TID 13 and 12. TID 11 is not as delayed because we have a developer saying, hey, in 2022, we're going to start doing a project. And so those were much more aggressive up front in TID 11 as opposed to 12 and 13. As it relates to the future development of the city, we still get a number of inquiries. My interpretation of what's going on right now is developers are still very eager to keep projects going and to get new projects in the ground. It's the financial institutions that have kind of started to pump the brakes on a few things just until we get through the pandemic and that we come out of it. And then it seems as though as long as the economy is still holding up, that this will continue, just maybe not at the rate that it was previously.
Sure, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, Dawn, what's the next steps?
Okay, again, the timing of these and doing these now as opposed to waiting until more that 5-year timeline is when the values come out in August of this year. The city has had success in some of their other districts, and they'll probably be over that 12%. So once that happens, the general terminology is they're tiffed out, and they would have to wait a period of time before they could look to creating any new districts. And other communities that have been in this situation, and it's basically halted economic development and new development taking place because many times there's need for, as we've identified, infrastructure improvements or something for that development to even occur. So it does delay things if that should happen. Again, I think we point that out, and Ryan made comments. It's the TID is not a commitment that all these costs will be undertaken. It's really to put that tool in place to allow for the opportunity to assist if necessary, and to put the cost in the ground if those costs are needed to allow for development to happen. All costs and incentives will require future action by City Council. And they're not obligated to undertake anything, but it's important, I think, for the timing of the city to get these districts in place. So those 3 areas focus for improvements and expand to the tax base in the city, at least have the opportunity to help guide and go forward. So as far as our timeline, the City Council took a couple of different meetings where they reviewed and made the decision to move forward with this. We're holding this initial joint review board day to introduce all 3 of the districts to you. This evening at 6 o'clock is the public hearing and before the Planning Commission, and they'll take action to consider the creation of 11 and 13 at that time. We're scheduled now to move forward with the City Council consideration on those 2 districts on the 20th of July. Because, as Ryan mentioned earlier, these are the types of district where all the property owners need to be notified by letter of the public hearing. When the OR made it clear to us that we could not connect our boundaries with the railroad right away, we kind of put a halt and delayed the TID 12 because we were adding additional parcel, and we wanted to make sure all those property owners were sufficiently notified to be attendance at the hearing. So we've moved the hearing for TID number 12 to July 27th. So I've got a interim date, and I think we can discuss this. We had originally talked about having the your body reconvene in on somewhere between the 23rd and the 27th of July to consider your action. What at the time would have been for all three of the TID districts. Now it could only be for two of them because we've now moved the city council action for TID 12 to August 10th. So we can talk about that when you to the agenda item and scheduling your next meeting and input from the city is if we want to do that as your action in a two-step phase, or just have you meet once and do all three at one time. That would have to take place, would be my recommendation, somewhere between the 12th and the 14th of August. It would require us to notify of that meeting prior to the city council action. But you know, I think that's a discussion we can have at this group today. And then once you've considered if there's affirmation to move forward, then these discs would go through a certification process with the DOR, and the submittals would have to take place between your final action and the 30th of October was the deadline for creation of any new districts with a base value of January of 2020. So that concludes my comments. And Ryan, I can stop sharing, and then I don't know, do I have to do something to relinquish the host, or can you just take it back over?
I think you have to, Dawn, I think you have to go over and make Ryan the host again.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing first. And then.
If you click on his, the three dots by his name or his photo.
Oh, okay. Make host.
Yep.
Oh, no, wait, that was wrong. I had the wrong dot. I almost made Chris the host.
Sorry to
Yeah,
backtrack.
and asked a second time.
Sorry to backtrack. I was just reviewing some of the stuff with TID number 12. And given that you can't use that railroad corridor, why the choice to include the residential parcels on the west side of that instead of the commercial parcels that abut Minnesota? You know, there's Constructs, there's Day Service, the Central Wisconsin Community Theater. It seems like that's a better connecting section, and then you pick up those commercial parcels that are on the east side that may also be considered blighted.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to address that. So essentially, when we created these TIF boundaries, we had to be under just shy of 25 million in assessment, and that included land, the improvements or the buildings, and then personal property. So when you pick up more commercial properties, typically commercial assessments are significantly higher than residential assessments. And so in order to prevent us from going above that that maximum amount, we picked up the lower assessed properties, which were residential along the railroad corridor.
Okay. It did, yeah, that makes sense. It seems that area is maybe in also a need of some redevelopment.
Yeah, I mean, down the road, we could, you know, as TID 5 closes out, I would suspect that some of these boundaries are going to change because then we would hopefully at that point be under the 12% equalized value rule, and we can amend the boundaries as we go through the life of the TID.
Thank you.
Okay, so what is everybody's thoughts in regards to this Joint Review Board's final meeting? Do we want to wait and do them all in August, or do we want to split them up? I think the easiest thing to do would just have them all in August, unless there's a reason for, someone wants to split them up.
Well, I guess I have a question for Dawn because, obviously doing them in August 1st, you have the preliminary values come out from the Department of Revenue. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering, if we push it to say August 12th to August 14th, if we're running a risk of the Department of Revenue saying, well, we've got these preliminary values out, that we should use for the 12% test instead. Dawn, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, I do. Brian and I had an extensive conversation with the DR regarding the railroad right-of-way and what the process would be necessary and what we needed to do to complete that creation. And we got confirmation from them that as long as City Council adopted the plan prior to 15th, they were fine with going back to the prior year's values, the January of 19 equalized values to determine the base. Now the base of these properties will be on 1 at 20, so those numbers tweak a little bit, but as far as what the estimated base value will be, but they confirmed that. So, I've timed the JRB meeting to be prior to that 8/15 as well. I know that was one of the things we had talked about before. So I think it would be important to get that action in. We have a 5-day notice requirement. So if we publish on that Friday, the 7th, which is before council action, but it still would provide us the ability to do that within 5 days, and the 12th to the 14th would meet that. So I feel confident that with the DOR telling us that our 8/15 is the final date, that we'd be fine with Corey.
Okay.
Okay, then I would suggest that we look at August 12th. If we did it about this time again, 9 a.m.
That's the only day I can't make it.
The 12th, you can't make it. Okay, how about 13th? Can anyone not make it on August 13th at 9 a.m.? Okay, I think we're good. Next meeting will be August 13th at 9 a.m. Ryan, you want to make note of that and get everything squared away on that end?
Yep.
All right. With that, our business is concluded. Did anybody have any final comments before we leave? Thank you all for participating in this, and we will talk to you in August. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll do adjourn.
Thanks.
Yeah, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We will just adjourn.
Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.